So, as I said, my name is Tamohara Dasa. I also live in Alachua, Florida, which is only about 2.5 hours from here. Is this, can you hear this? You can be pretty over your head. So, I'm going to just speak a little bit tonight on the Bhagavad-gita, and hopefully have some relevance to to all of you aspiring devotees. We are all aspiring devotees. Not that we are devotees, but we're trying to be. And particularly those of you who are making significant steps forward. So I wanted to start a reading from the Bhagavad-gita. This is chapter 3, verse 10. Sahajagya prajakshishtva puruvacha prajapati anena privashyadvam esha post vishnukamadu. This is the translation purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yajna," sacrifice, because in its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. So this verse in purport is sort of the formula for how we live in this material world. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The material creation by the Lord of creatures, Vishnu, is a chance offered to the conditioned souls to come back home, back to Godhead. All living entities within the material creation are conditioned by material nature because of their forgetfulness of their relationship to Vishnu or Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic principles are to help us to understand this eternal relation, as is stated in the Bhagavad-gita, Itaischa sarvaraham eva vedya. The Lord says that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Him. In the Vedic hymns it is said, Patim Vishvat Vameshvaram. Therefore, the Lord of the living entities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. The Prajapati is Lord Vishnu, and He is the Lord of all living creatures, all worlds, and all beauties, the protector of everyone. The Lord created this material world to enable the conditioned souls to learn how to perform yajna, or sacrifice, for the satisfaction of Vishnu, so that while in this material world, they can live very comfortably without anxiety, and after finishing the present material body, they can enter into the kingdom of God. That is the whole program for the conditioned soul. By performance of yajna, the conditioned souls gradually become Krishna conscious and become godly in all respects. In the age of Kali, the Sankirtan yajna, the chanting of the names of God, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this transcendental system was introduced by Lord Chaitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtan yajna and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna, in his devotional form as Lord Chaitanya, is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam with specific reference to the Sankirtan yajna. In this age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates, by performance of Sankirtan yajna. Other yajnas prescribed in Vedic literature are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but the Sankirtan yajna is easy and sublime for all purposes, as recommended in the Bhagavad-gita also. So Krishna, in the Bhagavad-gita and in Srila Prabhupada's purport of this 10th verse of the 3rd chapter, is explaining how the material world is created for two purposes. First of all, it's a place for those rebellious souls, those of us who did not want to be involved in the loving service of Krishna. Thank you very much. It's a place for us to come. So in one sense, the material world could be considered almost like a prison house. For those of us who have material desires separate from Krishna's interest, this is a place for us to come. But just like a prison in the material world, in the ideal world, of course they're not really like this always, but ideally the prison should not just be a place of punishment, but it should also be a place of reformation. So this material world is also like that, and its second purpose is as a place of reformation
as a place for the conditioned souls to understand their relationship with God and return to Him. So the idea is not that we simply stay in this material world forever, but the idea is that we get out of this material world. And as Krishna said, that is the, how did he put it? That is the program for the conditioned souls. To find a way to live happily within this material world, following the laws of God, and following the natural order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and be able to gradually perfect one's life. So, of course, even in the prison, some prisoners actually don't want to get out, do they? There are actually people who have been in prison for so long. They say that sometimes if they get out, say in their old age, and they've been in prison for 50 years, they actually don't know what to do. So they almost would rather stay there because it's what they know. So in the same way, we have been in this material world for lifetime after lifetime, for countless hundreds and thousands and perhaps millions of years, life after life, in different species of life, trying to enjoy this material world. So we are at the point where we think this is our home. It seems natural to us. It often feels natural to us, but it isn't our real home. Because just as the prisoner, his real place is not in the prison. The real place is to be out in the free world with the rest of the people. Our position is to be with Krishna, to be in the spiritual world. But because of contact with this material nature, the three modes of nature, for so many lifetimes, we have forgotten that. So, Krishna consciousness is a way of reviving that natural spiritual relationship that we have with God. Of understanding who we really are, not this material body, and not this material mind, intelligence, or false ego, but the real spirit soul, the Atma, the Jiva who is within this body. And realizing that that Jiva has a relationship with God. Once we are able to restore that relationship, then we are able to become liberated. Now, this verse is talking about this word jagya, or sacrifice. A lot of times people don't really like that word very much. Because sacrifice means giving up something, right? People don't really like to have to give up something. People want to be able to be free, to be able to enjoy life as they wish. But when you think about it, everything requires sacrifice, doesn't it? If you want anything of value, there's some sacrifice. Are any of you doctors or lawyers or whatever?
Many computer engineers.
Computer engineering, okay. So to become a computer engineer, did you just decide, I'd like to be a computer engineer? You walked into your place of employment and said, give me a job? There was probably several years of study. And so that several years of study involved a lot of work, a lot of money, a lot of sacrifice, right? So anything that we do to become successful takes some sacrifice. I was a college professor in psychology for a number of years. And to do that, I had to go to graduate school, and I had to get my doctorate, and I had to write a dissertation, and it's like after a while you just want to get somehow or another get finished with this process. So you can, but to accomplish that requires some sacrifice. So why would spiritual life be any different? People think, oh well, spiritual life should just sort of come naturally, spontaneous. I shouldn't have to do anything. Shouldn't be any work involved. No, it does require some sacrifice. And in fact, in this particular verse, the specific sacrifice that is required is mentioned. It should be jagya for Vishnu. So jagya for sacrifice for Vishnu is recommended. Not sacrifice for anything else, not for the demigods, not towards one's country, not towards one's family. These things are all right. These things may be necessary. We live in this world, we are members of society, we are part of a certain culture, we are part of a nation, and there are duties. These duties are called dharma. And we all have a certain dharma which we have to fulfill. But that is not our highest dharma or our highest duty. Krishna is describing that our highest duty is towards Him, to surrender to Him and to offer sacrifice to Krishna. Krishna says later in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, Yat karoshi yadashnasi yat kosi vidasi yat yat tapashyasi kuntaya tat karoshi mad arpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. So the process of Bhakti Yoga requires some sacrifice, but it's not a very difficult sacrifice, really. Krishna is just saying, whatever you do, offer to him in love. It's really quite simple. Whatever we eat, we offer to Krishna as prasadam, and then we take. Whatever work we do in the spirit of devotion for Krishna. Whatever activities we're doing, if we're raising a family, then we do it for Krishna. We raise our children in God consciousness. And we try to give them good training so that they will also have the opportunity for spiritual life. So it is not that we have to do something very artificial or very difficult or some very severe penance or austerity, but a little bit of austerity. And that simply means that we shift the focus of our life, instead of everything centered on myself, my senses, my enjoyment, to Krishna becoming the center. That our spiritual life becomes the central focus in our life while we're carrying out our other duties. So it is not that one cannot lead a normal life or family life. In fact, in this very verse, it has been explained that if one acts according to religious principles, carries out one's life according to their dharma, is acting, offering everything in service for Krishna, then this is fine. Then one can do this. One can have a happy life in Krishna consciousness, a happy life even in this material world, because the center is there, because the understanding of the purpose of life is there. There is a reason for what we do. I remember before I became a devotee, I was talking to some of the people here. I was fortunate enough to meet Srila Prabhupada in 1972 and became his disciple and devotee at that time. And I remember before that time, unlike many of you who may have been familiar with Vedic literatures and the Bhagavad-gita or with Krishna, I never had an opportunity when I grew up. And I did not know what was the purpose of life. And I was always looking for that. And I was always thinking, what is the reason for doing anything? And that reason was very elusive. That meaning was very hard to find. Until coming across, actually, I read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita, and I understood. It's like once I read Bhagavad-gita, it became clear. It's almost like I felt, yeah, I knew that. That's what it is, but I never knew, but I didn't really know it. But it was so familiar, because Krishna's words are familiar to us. They're familiar to the soul. The soul understands who we are. Our original nature is Satchidananda. That means that we are eternal, we are full of knowledge, and we are full of happiness. But that Satchidananda nature of the living entity is covered over by all of these coverings of this material world. But once we come in contact with spiritual life, that becomes revived. And that original nature comes out. Prabhupada, in one of his famous lectures and one of the early records that he made, I remember, because we used to hear this a lot, Prabhupada would say, Krishna consciousness is not an artificial imposition on the soul. In other words, Krishna consciousness is who we are. That's all it is. It's really discovering and reviving who we are. And how do we do that? Well, the yogya that's prescribed, that's stated here, and Srila Prabhupada talks about this in this purport, is the Sankirtan yogya. Each age in this world, first world goes through different cycles. Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. This Kali Yuga, we've been in 5,000 years now. Kali Yuga is the worst age. It's called the Iron Age. It's called the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. We see a gradual decrease in good qualities. But there is a wonderful silver lining. And that is because, although it's the most difficult age, the most easy and sublime and powerful process of spiritual realization is given. And that is the chanting of the holy name. And of course the Yuga Avatar, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who came only 500 years ago, in cosmic time, 500 years is nothing. That's like yesterday, practically, because we know that some of our stories in the Bhagavatam are millions and millions of years old. So Lord Chaitanya came only 500 years ago, and he inaugurated this chanting of the holy name. Of course, the chanting of God's names is there throughout the Vedic literatures, throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-gita. But it was really established by Lord Chaitanya with the idea that this is a process that everyone can take up. We just saw an 8-year-old very nicely leading us in the chanting of the holy name. So what is the hindrance? What is the difficulty of anybody taking up this chanting? That is the beginning of our spiritual life. Actually, it's described that our spiritual life begins with certain devotional practices. And the Srimad Bhagavatam tells us that we begin spiritual life with Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and then remembering Vishnu and Krishna. So hearing and chanting go together very closely. We not only need to chant Hare Krishna, but we need to, and hearing means hearing the Bhagavad-gita, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing about spiritual life, discussing spiritual topics with one another as you do when you come here every week. So this is very important. In fact, in the Nectar devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami, he describes 5 processes specifically of devotional service. 64 different processes are mentioned. And then Rupa Goswami says, of these, there are 5 that he says have amazing power. Amazing, this is the words Rupa Goswami uses, amazing power for us to make spiritual advancement. And those 5 processes that are listed are chanting Hare Krishna, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam or the other Vedic literatures, associating with devotees, worshiping the deity, and living in a holy place. Of course, we understand that anywhere where devotees are associating and the chanting is going on, that is a holy place. You don't necessarily have to move to Vrindavan or somewhere like that, or Tirupati, we were just talking about that. I see the picture of Venkateshwar on the
Yes.
I have that same picture. It was given to me when I was there about 2 weeks ago. They're very nice. But the worship of the deity is very, very nice because it connects us with Krishna as a person. God is the supreme person, and we tend to be a little impersonalist, especially in the Western world. We often think that God is some force or some light or something, but when we worship the deity of God, of Krishna, then we understand I am serving a person, the supreme person, a spiritual personality, not exactly like me, but nevertheless a person, which means there is a relationship. And when we chant Hare Krishna, we are entering into a relationship with Krishna, because Krishna is non-different than his name. Everything about Krishna is spiritual, purely spiritual. That means Krishna's words in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna's holy name, Krishna's deity form, are all spiritual. And when we associate in love with those spiritual forms of Krishna, then we become purified. So, you're all, many of you, beginning that process, either just beginning or you've been doing it for some time, or involved in it maybe for some years. But this is really the issue, to begin one's spiritual life, to take up the process of Krishna consciousness. So tonight, some of you are being honored, you're being recognized for beginning these practices, the spiritual practices, particularly the chanting. And I think this is just very, very wonderful. I was so enthusiastic when Renee was telling me about beginning this process of path of perfection, so that we can, because we're all part of this family of Vaishnavas, family of devotees. And it's like, giving some recognition to one another, that you have made some accomplishment, that you have made some steps towards coming closer to Krishna. So I know many of it has to do with chanting rounds, and this is, of course, our main process of Krishna consciousness. I also want to emphasize the other process, hearing and chanting, Shravana Kirtanam. It's also very important to understand this philosophy. In other words, why are we chanting? Why are we chanting Krishna's name? Who is Krishna? Of course, some of these things are very simple, but some of the questions get a little more complex. So, when we hear the Bhagavad-gita, or read the Bhagavad-gita, or the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is another way that we are connecting with Krishna. And we are also, our mind and intelligence is becoming convinced. And we have a deeper understanding of why we are chanting Hare Krishna, why we are worshiping Krishna in his deity form, and why we are involved in spiritual life. So I'd encourage all of you to particularly read the books of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada has translated these Vedic literatures into English, and of course they've been also been again translated into many, many languages throughout the world. And so we have a great opportunity, to actually associate and hear from Srila Prabhupada through his books. So even though he is no longer with us, he is still with us. And one of the ways that we associate with Srila Prabhupada is through his literatures. So continue hearing and chanting and having this wonderful association of devotees. I want to thank Srila very much for making this facility available. This is a very, very nice service for the devotees. Any questions? Or do you want to go on?
Questions.
Are there any questions or add anything or any thoughts people have?
I have two questions.
Yes.
So, as we were speaking, you said you became a devotee like 40 years back. Like when you became a devotee, does your work life impacted? Was it work life impacted in any way? Or?
Well, for me it was. At that time I moved into a temple and became a full-time devotee for a number of years. Later I went back to school and I finished my education, and I was working for a number of years, 15 or 20 years, while I was raising my family. And I was a college professor for many years, and I did some other things. And about 7 years ago, I sort of semi-retired from that, and so that I could do more direct service with ISKCON. But I still teach on the internet. I was explaining to you, so I keep up some of my work. So there's no hindrance to being able to be a devotee and perform devotional service and to have a job and raise your family, all that. It's a matter of consciousness. It's a matter of that we redirect our energies and our interest and our focus so that we see everything we do as devotional service. Now, sometimes that seems a little difficult in the beginning. When I'm going to this job, I don't even really like it. How is this devotional service, or like that? But if you understand that, why am I doing this job? I'm doing this for my family. I'm raising my family. My family are all devotees, becoming devotees. They're being taken care of nicely. Perhaps I have a little extra money that I can help with Krishna consciousness, or make some donation. Or, so many ways that we can. And then if we have some extra time, some spare time, then we can do things like this, come together, the association of devotees. So I think that our challenge is not to say, well, I can't do it because I have so many other obligations. The challenge is, how do we perform those obligations in such a way that I can maximize my spiritual life?
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have maybe you have some realization about that or understanding? How have you found you've been able to work a job and still be connected with your
I would
spiritual
say
life?
that we should start this process early, because I started, I would say, late, after I had kids. Right? So it's lot engaging. A lot of time goes in work, maintaining the family, taking care of kids. Now it's a time to teach them, not it's a time for me to sit and read and learn. Right? So I would think I should have started it early, so that I had this information, and then now it was time to teach them, and mutually learn also. But
that's very good advice. Thank you. Yeah.
That's what I feel.
It is good. Now, when I joined the Krishna conscious movement, we had a daughter. I already had a family, so it's never too late either.
It's never too late, but it is.
Yeah. But your point is good. Start early.
Yeah,
learn this philosophy so that we have more to give to our children. Chanting Hare Krishna. I mean, of course, there's two distinct ways of chanting. One is kirtan, sankirtan, where we're chanting together, and the other, of course, is japa, chanting on our beads, which is really more of a solitary thing. And some people find it difficult, and some people prefer it. It's kind of an individual thing. But japa gives us an opportunity to really deeply meditate upon Krishna and to experience Krishna in his name in a very personal way.
Where did you put the crayons?
Now, we don't have to do anything particularly different. Sometimes somebody asks Srila Prabhupada, when we chant Hare Krishna on our beads, what should we be thinking of? Prabhupada said, don't think of anything. You don't have to worry about thinking. Just chant. You try to hear the mantra. So the main thing is to hear the mantra. And what I found is times if I'm not feeling, so much, or I'm just kind of chanting and I'm not really feeling in it, it's usually because I'm not really attentively hearing. Attentively hearing is the key to chanting. And that's why if you can do it, and I know sometimes it's difficult with children like that, but if you can do it at times when you don't have distractions, and that's why also early in the morning it's recommended, because especially Brahma Muhurta hour, early in the morning, it's just more peaceful, there's more time. I know my second daughter, she's initiated by Radha Swami, and so she's trying to chant 16 rounds a day. And when her children were babies, it was real difficult for her. But she said she would just get up as early as she could, and she wouldn't even take a shower or anything. She would just chant as many rounds as she could until the children woke up. It's kind of like sometimes you have to do whatever you have to do, to be able to do it. And sometimes it isn't so easy. But whether you chant in 1 round or 16 rounds, try to do good quality, to focus on them, and gradually increase. I personally feel that when you chant more rounds, you do actually experience it differently. My own experience is that it takes sometimes a couple, 3 rounds before my mind sort of stops. Mantra means to control the mind, right? That's what the word mantra means. So we're trying to control the mind, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of effort. So I usually find that if you're able to sit and chant more than 1 or 2, 3, 4 rounds, the mind kind of calms down. And you actually find that the mantra starts working. And you become free from the mind. Sometimes you can just sort of see the mind going, because we're not the mind. It's easy to say we're not the body, right? That's pretty clear. We're not this body. This isn't me. I'm inside. But we often mistake ourselves with our mind. We think whatever I'm thinking, that's who I am. No, it isn't. The mind is just another subtle element. And Krishna says in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad-gita that above mind, intelligence, and ego is the self. Is that living entity who is actually pervading the entire body. So that's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to get at where we're sort of awakening the spirit soul in relationship with Krishna. Now, it's hard to do that artificially. Okay, now I'm going to experience Krishna. And anyway, you can't order Krishna. Krishna is the supreme independent personality of Godhead. But we can please Krishna through our sincerity, and Krishna will reveal himself to us. That's really if we're just sincerely, and pray, we must be praying to Krishna, please, help me in devotional service. And eventually the holy name reveals itself to us. I don't know if that was quite the right. Those are some of my thoughts on chanting, but it's very, very important. I think when we really get involved in chanting japa, it sort of takes our spiritual life to another level. Yeah. Would you agree, sir?
Yes.
Initially, when we are introduced to Krishna consciousness, we feel so much of bliss and so much of enthusiasm because it's something new and we love kirtan, we love everything.
Yeah.
Then as time goes on, we become familiar and then the motivation kind of dies down. And so how do we keep up?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point. Did everybody understand that? Sometimes you feel a lot of pleasure and bliss, because it's described in the Nectar of Devotion that Krishna consciousness gives us relief from all anxieties, relief from the material world, and that happens right away, even at the beginning stage. So we're feeling some relief from our material life, and so what we experience is technically it's described as para attachment or shadow attachment. It's like Krishna's giving us a little special, like a boost, but it does not last forever. We have to sort of, after that initial enthusiasm of feeling the freedom from material anxiety and material suffering, which is being relieved by Krishna, and also this para attachment, which is also based upon the actual connection to Krishna from the spiritual master. So we're sort of, that's why it's called a shadow, we're kind of in that shadow and being pulled along with that. But there is a time then when we have to sort of fly solo, you know, where it requires more purification and more surrender for us to, you know, continue at that level. Sometimes we just have to be a little patient. You know, it's described in Nectar of Instruction that we have to go about Krishna consciousness with enthusiasm, but also patience. You know, that's so we have to be a little bit patient because we have to understand that we've been in this material world a long time. We have a lot of, it's called anarthas, those bad habits, and we have, you know, so much contamination of the mind that's there. So it's going to take a little time. It's a process. So we have to be a little bit patient, you know, while the process is working and we become purified. But still, there will be those times when we'll experience spiritual happiness. You know, that's there. Those are the things that often keep many of us going. You know, those times when we really experience the holy name through kirtan or japa, or sometimes we'll see the beautiful form of the deity and really know that Krishna is there. So those things come about, and they'll be back. It'll come back. It'll be there. You know, it requires a little faith too. You know, it's described in the beginning there must be some initial faith, and through faith comes association of devotees, the beginning of bhajana kriya, the beginning of our spiritual practice. That becomes stronger, then eventually the higher stages of realization come about. There needs to be a little bit of faith in the beginning. And I think one thing that many of us have experienced, if you've been doing this for about 40 years, is I think that we can truly say that that faith does grow, that faith increases and becomes stronger and stronger. So that even if there are difficulties, and there will be difficulties. Why? Because we're in the material world. The material world means difficulty. But if they're there, eventually as we continue the process of Sadhana Bhakti, hearing and chanting, our faith will become stronger and stronger so that we know that regardless of what happens, I'm in Krishna's hands. And Krishna is looking out for us and is arranging things for our best, for our learning, and for our surrender.
What is the difference between helping a human being in general and helping them to be spiritual or be Krishna consciousness?
Helping them become Krishna conscious as opposed to helping them
in general, like to live a better life?
Yeah. Well, one is temporary and one is eternal. If I give some money in charity or I help somebody in need, it's a good thing to do. It's pious. It's good karma. You know, it's a good result. And we shouldn't be callous or hard-hearted about, you know, people in need. But that benefit will be temporary for them. It'll be for some time. When we help someone in Krishna consciousness, or we give someone prashadam, or they hear the chanting, or whatever it may be, if they receive a transcendental literature, that is eternal. It's another nice verse in the Bhagavad-gita, that's 240, that Krishna says, in this process there's no loss or diminution. A little advancement in this practice can save one from the most dangerous fear. So, and Prabhupada explains in that purport, I think it's 240, that it's like an eternal bank account. Whatever one performs in devotional service, you gain eternal benefit. And even if you don't complete the process in this lifetime, you don't make it all the way to the end of the Path of Perfection program. But even you know, then whatever we do in this lifetime is immediately gotten Krishna. And then he gave this verse, Nicho Nichananam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Yoga Vedati Kaman, which says that there's one eternal supreme person, and he is taking care of all the other living entities. So Krishna is quite capable of taking care of everyone. So why is there so much distress? Why is there so many problems? Because people have forgotten God, and they're not working according to God's laws. They're not working in harmony with Krishna. So if we, and then Prabhupada said, so my instruction to you, well, there were two or three of us, my instruction to you boys and girls, he said, is to make the world perfect by the systematic propagation of Krishna consciousness, as far as you were able to do so. So in other words, Prabhupada was saying that these are there's so many problems, but the real problems, the stem, the root problem, is godlessness, lack of Krishna consciousness. So if we can give, this is a long answer to your question, so if we can give people Krishna consciousness, then we're solving their real problems of life. So they don't have to take birth again, ultimately. These are great questions.
Why does Shravanam come before Kirtanam? Because chanting is the Yoga Dharma, right? So what is the unique position of Shravanam?
I was thinking about that when I was reading that. I wonder if someone will ask that. Because how would you know how to chant? Only if you had heard about chanting. So we first have to hear spiritual knowledge. We have to hear, and then, and also, when you think about it, the chanting, and even in the chanting Hare Krishna, we hear the chant, we hear the lead chanted, and then we respond. So we're always hearing first. We're hearing the mantra, and then we're chanting, we're repeating the mantra. But it's saying that, hearing is the key. Because without hearing, and of course hearing means hearing from the right person, hearing from the spiritual master, hearing from the right authority, hearing from the Bhagavad-gita, the Vedic literatures. And that way then we understand what we need to do. We need to chant Hare Krishna.
Question again. Just to reply, if everyone is like Krishna consciousness, then problems of the world will be gone.
Yes.
How would that be possible? Like, let's say, for example, there are 7 billion people on this planet.
Yes.
Like, everyone is Krishna conscious.
Yes.
Do you think that poverty and bad environment and everything will be gone?
Largely. It might take a little while, but when you think about it, so many of these problems are caused by things like greed, things by overconsumption, that people want more than their allotment. Krishna says that we all have a quota, and we're entitled to a certain amount, but we're not entitled to take beyond our quota. And this whole thing with like the environment, pollution, everything. I remember there was a book in the 1970s. It was called "Small is Beautiful." And the things, but anyway, they were saying that in 1970 they said if we went down to half of the total energy consumption, it'd be back to the rate we were at in about late 1950s. It was only a few years before. So in other words, those of us who lived in the 1950s don't remember that we were suffering or that we were primitive or something. Everything was very comfortable. So there's so many of the problems we can see, even just sort of on the physical cause and effect level, are caused by excessive needs, excessive greeds, desires for excessive sense gratification, for profit, and things like this. Now, of course, there's a deeper principle. The spiritual principle is that Krishna is in charge of all of this, and even like the Earth planet and the Earth goddess Bhumi will either give or withhold according to the principle of sacrifice of Jagat. So that's why the verse we were reading, 3:10, was saying that this idea when there is sacrifice for Vishnu, then everything comes in harmony. So not only we can see sort of the physical cause and effect, but by the process of worship, by the process of Krishna consciousness, everything comes into harmony, and the earth provides whatever is needed. It's kind of a subtle point, a spiritual point, but it's actually a fact.
I have one more question. Like back home in India, the main god was Lord Shiva. But I did not really paid any attention. But in the home, we would pray Lord Shiva as our main god. Is it any offense for Lord Shiva? But because now they are praying to Krishna or Vishnu, I'm causing any offense not praying to Lord Shiva?
Are you caused offense by not praying to Lord Shiva? No. Lord Shiva is considered to be the greatest Vaishnava. Lord Shiva is a devotee of Krishna. Lord Shiva is also a partial expansion of Krishna. It's kind of a complicated type of avatar. Actually called Shiva Tattva. It has his own category. But Lord Shiva is very pleased by seeing you worship Krishna, because he worships Lord Krishna. It's also described that as far as all the demigods are concerned, that, it's the idea is like watering the root of the tree. If you water the root of the tree, all the branches and everything else is nourished. You don't have to go and spray water on the leaves. If you water to the root, everything else. And in the Bhagavad-gita it says the purposes of many small ponds are served by one great reservoir. So Krishna is the root of the tree. Krishna is that great reservoir. If we are offering our service to Krishna, then all the demigods, everyone is satisfied and everyone is happy, because they are his servants.